Chapter 15. Making Plans. It was 30 minutes after midday when John woke up. Susan was still sleeping. She was lying on her side with her back to him. His eyes followed the curve of her spine, and he remembered the painting of Venus by Velázquez in the National Gallery. Only her hair is different. In the painting it's dark reddish-brown, he thought. Susan's hair was spilling over her shoulders and onto the pillow in a river of yellow. The fingertips of her hand rested on her shoulder, where they held back some of her hair like a waterfall which moved very slightly on her back when she breathed. John was so overwhelmed with this vision that he kept perfectly still to keep her from waking, while he realised that this was one of the moments in his life he would remember forever. Eventually he became aware that Susan was moving. She turned over, looked into his eyes and smiled. "I love you," said John. Susan's eyes seemed to double in size. "You said it, at last." "I did, didn't I, without thinking about it. That's the trick with these things. You probably think I'm ridiculous." "No, I don't. You're the most wonderful man on earth, and I want us to have hundreds of babies together." "What, all at once?" "One to start with, anyway." "I'm sure that could be easily arranged, madam. Listen, I've been wanting to tell you I loved you ever since I met you, which was all of 3 days ago. It is ridiculous, I know it is, especially as I feel as if I've known you all my life. But I've never said it to anyone before. I've been feeling all awkward and gawky, exactly the same as I felt when I was 15 and forced myself to ask my first girlfriend to go out with me, as they used to say. "You want to go for a walk?" I think I said. "Did you love her?" "Not really, but she was very pretty and my mates told me she really liked me. It was sort of like that. But here I am, 12 years later, and I'm really in love for the first time. It's fantastic, but I've developed a bit of anxiety. I've become very aware that you are too valuable to lose." "Fat chance. You're not going to get rid of me easily." "On yesterday I mean, I thought I saw you in the crowd at the football match, and my heart started beating like mad. I was disappointed when it wasn't you, but elated again when I thought how beautiful you were compared to her. Then in the evening, when I thought I saw the digger smash you into bits, I was terrified. It's been like a roller coaster ride, especially with that stuff by the canal on top of everything else. But when I woke up next to you just now, it was the happiest I've ever been in my life." "Yes," said Susan slowly. "I think you are most definitely in love with me." She smiled. "Good. In it?" "Very." "Are you anxious now?" "Not at all." "Nor me. Hey, I know what I was going to ask you. Last night before Lindsay drove me home, I said, 'Why are you looking at me like that?' And you said you'll tell me later. Tell me now, please." "Oh, yes, I know. You called me John." "What?" "You've never called me that before. It was if we had been together for ages. Very sexy." Susan climbed on top of him and held his hands down on the bed. "OK, John. Come and get me, John." She leant down and blew in his ear and then whispered, "John, John, John." John sat up and was about to kiss her when she giggled, jumped out of bed, trampled across the devastation that was her bedroom floor and grabbed her dressing gown. He chased her out of the room and across the landing until she locked herself in the bathroom. From behind the door she said, "We'd better get ready, Mr. Street. I want to have some lunch before we go to Ben's place." An hour later John was driving Susan in his car on the North Road out of Hempstead. "Look, that's new," he said as they stopped opposite a large gap in the wood on the right-hand side of the road. Through this opening there was a clear view of Ben's strange house with its weird machines and the dam, all bathed in unaccustomed sunlight resulting from the felling of so many trees. A makeshift road surface of broken bricks had been laid down so they were able to drive straight into the property and down a slight slope to park next to the house. A terracotta cloud of dust followed them and was still hanging in the air as they got out of the car. Ben came towards them with a sheaf of papers in his hand, which he waved about in a vain attempt to fan away the dust. They could hardly make out what he was saying until he came near, and they caught the tail end of a great deal of cursing. "Stupid bloody bastards! Look what they've done to my place!" "Sorry about the dust," said John. "I didn't realise." "I wasn't raving on about you. I was talking about the council. The dust doesn't matter. I meant to pour some water on it this morning, but I haven't had time. It's good to see you both anyway." He was shaking hands with John and kissing Susan. He gave the papers to Susan. "Look at all this stuff. All sorts of warnings and threats, mostly telling me to leave the property immediately while they demolish the buildings, for my own health and safety. What a load of Jackson Pollocks. Anyway, on Friday, my solicitor put some kind of preservation order on them, but it's only a delaying tactic. They are starting again on Friday week. By them, I mean Croucher Demolition. Guess who Colin Croucher's sister is on the council?" "Not Mrs. Malaprop," said Susan. "The very same, and he's just the monster you would expect her brother to be. They should have everything flattened by Saturday week. The solicitor says they can't make me leave while it's still my property, but I'm not allowed to interfere or hamper the demolition work." Susan put her arm round him. "I'm sorry, Ben. It must be awful for you." "Well, there you go. Nothing I can do about it, but I'm glad I can be here to stop them doing things they shouldn't. Look at all the trees they've cut down where you drove in. Mind you, I don't object to that because there has to be a way in for vehicles. You'll need that, won't you, Susan?" "Yeah, that's very true. So what exactly will be left? I mean, what am I buying?" "I'm selling you 4 acres of woodland with planning permission for a single dwelling. That's it. Pretty raw stuff. It'll be sad to see it all knocked down, but I want you to have a clean start to build whatever you want. I told the council they have to pay for the demolition because I've got no money," he said with a wink. "I think it's exciting. We'll be like pioneers, like early settlers in the Wild West." Ben looked at John. "You said we? Are you two a unit already? Are you buying this place together?" Susan and John looked at each other. John spoke first. "We've talked about this briefly. Yes, we have become a very close couple, which is a bit of an understatement, but this is Susan's project entirely, and she is going to buy it on her own, but of course I'll be involved in it as much as she wants me to be. I'm buying number 1 Herbert Street, and we are both going to live there while the place is finished. And then who knows? It might be good to keep Herbert Street for rental income while I live here with Susan. I'm very relaxed about it, and basically whatever Susan wants she can have." Susan smiled at Ben. "There you are. I told you he was an okay guy, didn't I?" "Shifty-looking newspaper man, I'd say. You know the sort." "Is the dam staying?" asked Susan. "Ah, I was going to mention that. They said they were going to demolish that too, but I'm going to fight to keep it. It does no harm, and it's a haven for fish and other wildlife, especially the kingfishers. You might be interested in the latest estimate from the electric company. I don't know why they hadn't thought of it before, but now they say they can run a cable from a much nearer substation, and if they do, it'll cost half as much, 15,000 instead of the 30,000 they quoted before. I know it's still a lot of money, but it would increase the value of the property by much more than that." Said Susan. "Maybe, but let's try and keep the dam anyway." "Oh, yes," said Ben. "I'll certainly try." "Excuse me for asking," said John, "but why didn't you make a vehicle access before?" Susan smiled because she knew what Ben was going to say. "Because I don't have a car, and also in the beginning I didn't want people noticing what I was doing to the place. Hence the path down the tunnel through the trees you discovered when you first came here. The path was wide enough for lorries, but after I'd finished my home I let it become overgrown again. I love that tunnel. It's like you're walking into a grotto," said Ben. "But how do you manage without a car?" "See that bicycle over there? Well, that takes me to the town centre very easily because it's a flat road. And the bus stop is just over there on the edge of Gadebridge Park. For everywhere else I get a taxi, or sometimes I hire a self-drive car or van. I always get those from a rent-a-heap place, then no one tries to steal them. It's much more economic for me than buying a car, with tax, insurance and petrol and stuff. Besides which I don't have many possessions apart from a few tools and this place. I don't have a watch or television or a camera even, would you believe? I don't even have a mobile phone. I have a landline in the house. I've got my painting stuff, of course, but a few brushes and canvases aren't worth anything. Possessions tie you down and give you anxiety. By the way, do you want any of the fixtures and fittings? They won't take those away if I tell them not to. What do you think, John? I wouldn't mind having the wood-burning stove and the solar panels. I'm sure we could use those. Definitely, especially with all this woodland. There must be enough dead branches just falling on the ground to keep it going. Very nearly, said Ben, but you'll find you're never short of firewood, and there is always building going on somewhere and skips full of the stuff. You wouldn't like the treadmill, would you? Sorry, said Susan, but tell me what you want for the other stuff and we'll pay you as soon as you like. Not a penny. I'll be very happy to see it put to good use. He was interrupted by Susan's mobile phone ringing. Hello? Yes? Yes, he's just here. Lindsay wants to talk to you, John. Hello, Lindsay. Oh, yes, how did it go with your Fashion King? Yes, all right. I can do that. I have a very early job on Thursday, but I'm free for the rest of the day. Is that soon enough? Of course. Yes, you're coming to dinner in Hemel Thursday night anyway. Great. Just a minute, I want to ask Ben something. He held the phone away from his face so everyone could hear what was being said. Lindsay says the buyer is very impressed and would like some photographs of the dresses. He doesn't want glossy magazine locations or expensive models just yet. He just wants some pictures to show his partners at their meeting next week. Can I borrow your studio, Ben? Of course, my pleasure. They won't be knocking it down for at least a week after you've finished with it. Thanks, Ben. John turned to Susan. The other thing Lindsay wants is for you to model the dresses. There will be 10 of them. Is that okay? Susan nodded, but took the phone from John. Hello, sis. Yes, I'll do it. But you know I don't get out of bed for less than $5,000. Of course, I don't want anything. What about you, John, and Ben? No, they're shaking their heads. OK, next Thursday, 10 o'clock in the morning. Talk to you before then. She handed the phone back to John. So that's all fixed. No, there's no need for prints. I'll email the images to you and you can pick the best ones and send them to your man. I'm fine. I'm looking forward to it. Bye. She says to thank you, Ben, and she says she owes you one. Her voice is exactly the same as yours, Susan. Are you all right with being photographed? I was going to suggest Lindsay models the dresses, save you taking time off work. They won't know. I'll tell them I'm with a client, which is almost true. Besides which, Lindsay will want to fuss around with the clothes and make them look right. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see you at work. I've never seen you taking photographs. Not even in the marquee? No, that's right, you were hiding behind a cupboard door or something. You'll like the studio, said Ben. Lots of daylight coming through the big windows which face north, so you won't get direct sunlight. Sounds perfect. Thanks. We wanted to ask you something else. Can you come to dinner on Thursday night? It'll just be us 3 and Lindsay. I hate dinner parties, you know that. I know, said Susan, pointing a thumb at John. He's another one. He has dining problems as well, so I promise the food will be ready at 7:30 on the dot. So please come. We've been wanting to do something all together before you go to Spain. Just the 4 of us, you say? Yeah, and no dressing up, strictly come as you are, nothing smarter than a T-shirt and jeans. That's what I'm wearing anyway. Mind you, come as you are could mean anything with Lindsay. She'll probably come as a vampire bat or something. All right then, I'll come, thank you. And don't worry about this place. It will be yours as soon as the paperwork is done. Listen, though, can you remind your sister there's no smoking allowed here, especially in the studio? Don't worry, she's given up. She's been to see a hypnotist and she's cured. John raised his eyebrows. She wasn't cured last night because I saw her having a fag. That's when I began to realise she wasn't you. Even then she had a hard job convincing me. Oh, Lindsay, Lindsay. I'm not the most rigidly honest person in the world, but my sister drifts into her own sort of reality whenever it suits her. She is probably convinced in her own mind that she's given up, even when she's lighting a cigarette. That's how she manages to do scary stunts and semi-dangerous stuff. She can take herself off into another world that suits her imagination whenever she feels like it. She doesn't even know she's doing it. Did I ever tell you about the incident with the cross on the church tower and the crane? Never mind. I'll tell you when we're having dinner. She won't mind. I do love my sister, despite what she's like, and yes, I'll tell her about not smoking in here. They said their goodbyes, and as they drove up the brick road to the gate, Susan turned round, looking back at Ben, standing all alone at the centre of his shabby kingdom. He's very sad, said Susan, blowing her nose to hide her tears. He's putting on a brave face, but I can tell you he's very angry and upset. But he does know the property's going to end up in your safe hands, and my helping hands too. It's just that he's standing there looking all vulnerable, and he reminds me of my dad. John stopped the car. Reminds you? Is he? Yeah, he died 3 years ago. My mum was killed in an accident. A wall collapsed on her as she was walking home from the shops. She died instantly. Wouldn't have known anything about it, so the hospital said. Hoped they were telling the truth. My dad died a year later from a broken heart, really. They were so close. I'm so sorry. I'm all right most of the time, just little things trigger the memory sometimes. Like just now. I meant to tell you about it ages ago. Trouble is, we've either been having loads of fun or traumatic drama. That pretty well sums it up. It's so nice at the moment. With us, I mean. We're very lucky. What do you mean luck? It's bloody hard work, laughed John. I want us to be like my parents, only hopefully live a bit longer. They were so happy together. I suppose the loss of your parents explains why you have a house in Herbert Street and Lindsay has a shop in Barnet. Yes, and my brother Andrew has a house by the beach in Australia. He and his partner Bruce have a chain of hairdressers in Perth. Wow! I know you would rather have your parents alive, but they provided for you all very well. Yes, bless them. What about your parents? Well, I'm an orphan too, would you believe? No, really? It's different to your story. My parents were killed in an earthquake in Japan 25 years ago on a family holiday. The hotel collapsed. I was 2 years old and my brother Wallace was 4. We survived because we were in a creche at the side of the main building. Wallace remembers very little of our mum and dad, and I have no recollection at all. We were brought up by wonderful adoptive parents in Portsmouth who spoilt us both. They died of old age, really, about 10 years ago. Wallace and I... By the way, his name got shortened at school, and my nickname was Fleet, so we were Wall Street and Fleet Street. Wallace and I came into a trust fund set up by my parents' life insurance company when they were each 21, and that's how I'm able to buy your place. There you go. Poor little orphans, aren't we? Only we're not poor. Good job, innit? There's still no money around since the recession. It's very nice having secure homes, but we will still have to work to eat, and there aren't many jobs about. Do you think missing our parents are another reason we're drawn to each other? What, each feeling the other is damaged too? Possibly. Are you getting all analytical again? Not really. Hey, you said you were a second child like me. What about Lindsay? I didn't. I said might be. And besides which I was born half a minute before my sister. So there, Mr. Smarty Pants.